The first signs of danger, hook and suspense, emerges. The quiet hum of the space station was suddenly interrupted by a loud, shrill alarm. The station's command center lit up with flashing red lights. It was a sound that no one on board ever wanted to hear. Every crew member's heart skipped a beat as the warning echoed through the halls. The emergency alert system came to life, its robotic voice cutting through the panic in the air. Red alert. Enemy fleet approaching. Captain Sarah Taylor rushed into the control room, her boots echoing on the metal floors as she moved quickly to her post. She was calm, but her eyes told a different story. She knew the danger was real. She quickly accessed the station's radar. Her breath hitched as she saw the numbers on the screen. A fleet of unknown ships was approaching, and they were closing in fast. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked, her voice steady but filled with concern. "Less than 20 minutes, replied Lieutenant Markle, his face pale as he stared at the screen. "It's a full fleet, Captain, and they're armed to the teeth. Can we contact anyone for backup?" Sarah asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it from someone else. The station's communications officer, Commander Ruiz, shook his head. "No response from any nearby fleets. We're on our own." Sarah felt the weight of those words. Alone, against an enemy they knew nothing about. The silence in the control room grew heavier as everyone turned to their stations, trying to process the gravity of the situation. But it wasn't just the size of the enemy fleet that was terrifying. It was the sheer unknown. Who were they? Where did they come from? And why were they attacking now? The tension in the room was suffocating. The crew had trained for scenarios like this, but no amount of training could fully prepare them for the real thing. As the radar confirmed the fleet's course, everyone knew a battle was coming, and it would be a fight for survival. Then, just as quickly as the alarm started, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The comms officer's voice cracked through the tension. "Captain, we're receiving a message." Everyone in the room froze. They weren't expecting any communication, not from an enemy. Certainly not from someone who might offer them help. But the message came through clear. "Humans, you have been warned. This is your last chance to surrender." Sarah's heart raced. She glanced at her officers, each one as confused as she was. The voice on the other end sounded calm, almost like it was relaying a message as though they were speaking to a different species, one that had no chance of standing against them. The arrogance in the message was unmistakable. Another voice, however, followed quickly after. This one was different, more powerful, more confident. "Humans are here, and we don't surrender." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. There was no mistake about it. The voice on the other end was not from the enemy. It was from her fleet, her people. It was a message meant for the enemy, and it was clear. The humans weren't here to beg for mercy. They were here to fight. For a moment, the room fell silent. Everyone exchanged confused looks. How could this be? The station wasn't even aware of any other human ships in the area. Were these humans part of a secret fleet? Had they been hiding for all this time, waiting for this very moment? Before anyone could speak, the radar blared again. This time, the readings were different. The enemy fleet was moving. But now, they weren't alone. A new group of ships had appeared on the station's radar. They were smaller than the enemy ships but fast, and they were closing in quickly. "Captain, you need to see this," Lieutenant Markle said urgently, pointing to the screen. Sarah's gaze locked on the new ships as they emerged from behind a distant moon. Their design was sleek and agile, different from the bulkier, more menacing ships of the enemy. These ships weren't here for negotiation. They were here to fight, and they were flying the human flag. "Human ships," Sarah whispered, barely believing her own words. It was happening. Humanity wasn't just going to stand and die. They were going to fight back. The communications officer brought up a new transmission on the screen. The message was brief but direct. "This is Commander Jameson of the Human Alliance. You will not be destroyed today. Prepare for battle." The message was not just for the enemy. It was for the crew of the station. Humanity had arrived. The impossible had happened. A fleet of human ships had come to their rescue. And with them came something even more dangerous than the unknown enemy: hope. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her, her fists clenched in determination. She wasn't alone. They weren't alone. The humans were here, and they weren't just here to survive. They were here to win. The stage was set. A battle like no other was about to begin. The station, once a quiet outpost in the far reaches of space, was now at the center of a galactic showdown. And it all started with a single message: humans are here. The enormous enemy fleet, building tension. The calm before the storm was over. The human fleet, smaller in number but bursting with energy and hope, had entered the fray. And the station's crew now watched in disbelief as their ships took position around the station. Captain Sarah Taylor stood at the helm, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the radar. The enemy fleet was close, too close, and the tension in the room mounted with every passing second. 20 minutes until enemy engagement. The words came from Lieutenant Markle, his voice barely a whisper. He was tracking the enemy fleet's approach, his face grim as the numbers on the screen updated in real time. The distance between the two fleets was closing rapidly, and time was running out. Captain Sarah turned to her officers. The situation was critical, and they couldn't afford any mistakes. The enemy ships were enormous, giant warships that looked like something out of a nightmare. They were heavily armored, bristling with weapons, and each one appeared to be carrying more firepower than all of the human ships combined. "We can't wait for them to get any closer," Sarah said firmly, her voice full of determination. "Lieutenant, prepare our fleet for the first wave. We'll need to hit them hard before they can unleash everything." Markle nodded without hesitation, fingers flying across the control panel as he gave the orders to the fleet. The atmosphere on the station grew tense as the crew prepped for what would likely be their most dangerous mission. The enemy fleet, now within sight, didn't slow down. They kept coming, their massive ships cutting through space with frightening speed and precision. The lights flickered as the station's power systems were engaged, preparing for the worst. Everyone aboard knew this was it. This was the moment they had been waiting for, and in an instant, everything would change. "Enemy fleet, approaching fast," reported Commander Ruiz, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of urgency. "They're not responding to our hails. Looks like we're on our own." The human fleet was in position now, moving into formation. The ships were fast, their sleek designs built for agility, not brute force. Still, each ship carried weapons capable of standing up to even the most powerful adversaries. It was a risky strategy, relying on speed and cunning rather than strength alone. But it was their only choice. Captain Sarah surveyed the battlefield, her mind racing as she considered every possible outcome. The enemy's ships were formidable, but they had never encountered human determination. She had seen it firsthand during the training exercises and simulations. Human soldiers, human pilots, they didn't just fight to survive. They fought to win. And that made all the difference. "All ships, prepare to engage," Sarah ordered, her voice resolute. She could feel the weight of every crew member's gaze on her, and she didn't flinch. There was no time for doubt. They would either win or lose together, as one. On the radar, the enemy fleet appeared in full, a collection of behemoth ships closing in, each one more terrifying than the last. The view screens filled with the images of enormous hulls, flickering with the deadly energy of their weapons. The human fleet, while smaller in number, was maneuvering skillfully, positioning themselves in ways that would give them an advantage. Each ship was like a predator, circling its prey. "Shields up," Markle shouted, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "We're going to need all the protection we can get." A low hum filled the room as the station's shields powered up, a faint glow forming around the perimeter of the station. It wouldn't hold forever, but it was enough to buy time. The human fleet was positioned in strategic spots, with their most experienced pilots in the front, ready to face the enemy head-on. The air was thick with anticipation. Sarah's grip tightened on the armrest of her chair. She could hear the pounding of her own heartbeat as the two fleets drew closer. The enemy ships had no intention of stopping or negotiating. There would be no surrender. The only way out was victory. Enemy fleet within range, Markle reported, his eyes glued to the screen. We've got only a few moments before they open fire. Sarah's mind raced. This wasn't just a battle. It was a statement. Humanity was here, and they weren't going to go down without a fight. As the enemy ships locked their targeting systems onto the human fleet, the first volley of fire came from the enemy's front lines. Explosions rippled through the vacuum of space as energy blasts shot out toward the human fleet. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Sarah barked, her voice firm, commanding. Don't give them an easy target. The human fleet scattered, dodging the incoming fire with impressive agility. The ships weaved and turned, avoiding the heavy blasts as they returned fire. Each shot was calculated, each movement precise. The smaller human ships darted around the massive enemy vessels, hitting weak points that the enemy had never expected. But the enemy wasn't backing down. More blasts came, the sound of their energy weapons humming through the void. The battle had begun, and it was anyone's game. Captain Sarah watched as the first few rounds of fire exploded around her fleet. The human ships held strong, but Sarah knew this was only the beginning. They were outnumbered. The enemy wasn't going to give up easily, but there was something the enemy didn't know. The humans weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something much greater. And the enemy fleet was about to find out just how dangerous humans could be. Humans make their entrance. Surprise reveal. The battle was in full swing. Explosions filled the blackness of space as the two fleets collided. The air in the station's control room was thick with tension, and every officer was focused on their screens, working tirelessly to keep the human ships from being overwhelmed. The enemy's firepower was immense, and every shot felt like it could end it all. Yet the human fleet wasn't backing down. They were moving with surprising agility, dodging blasts and responding with their own fire. But then, just as it seemed like the human fleet might start to lose ground, something extraordinary happened. A new signal appeared on the radar. At first, it was just a small blip, almost too faint to notice. The crew in the control room barely paid any attention at first, focusing on the battle already underway. But as the blip grew larger, it became clear more ships were coming. "What is that?" Lieutenant Markle asked, squinting at the radar. The new signal was growing in strength, and it wasn't an enemy ship. The unmistakable markings on the screen showed something different. "It's them. It's the rest of our fleet." Commander Ruiz's voice rang out, filled with disbelief and wonder. "They're here." The human fleet had just received reinforcements. From the distance, a group of ships appeared, emerging from behind a distant moon. They were sleek, fast, and deadly, cutting through space with ease. The enemy ships, who had been so sure of their victory, seemed to falter for a moment. They had been focused on the initial human fleet, not anticipating any reinforcements. But now, the tables were about to turn. "Captain, they're human ships," Markle said, his voice almost shaking with excitement. "It's not just a handful of ships. They're massive, bigger than I expected." Captain Sarah's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment she had hoped for. The human fleet had arrived in full force. "Prepare to engage," she commanded, her voice steady but filled with excitement. "Let's show them what humans can do." The new fleet was not like anything the enemy had seen before. While their ships were larger and more heavily armored, the human ships were fast and nimble. They could outmaneuver the enemy's bulky warships, slipping through their defenses like shadows. As the reinforcements entered the fray, the battle shifted. The enemy ships tried to adjust, but the surprise of the new arrivals threw off their calculations. The humans weren't backing down. They were overwhelming the enemy. For the first time, the enemy felt fear. The calm arrogance they had shown earlier was replaced with uncertainty. "All ships, go on the offensive," Captain Sarah ordered. Her orders rang out across the fleet as the human ships attacked with renewed vigor. They darted in and out of the enemy's reach, striking from unexpected angles. Energy blasts from their weapons hit with pinpoint accuracy, and the enemy was forced to retreat, their once unfaltering confidence shaken. The humans had arrived, and now the enemy was the one caught off guard. Commander Ruse's voice broke through the excitement in the room. They're pulling back. The enemy is retreating. Captain Sarah couldn't believe her ears. The massive fleet that had seemed unstoppable was faltering. The humans had turned the tide, and the enemy had no idea what hit them. But Sarah knew this wasn't over. The enemy might retreat, but they were not defeated yet. There was still danger lurking in the stars. Don't let your guard down, Sarah warned. We've got them on the ropes, but they'll be back. Stay alert. As the human ships reformed, the once threatening enemy fleet was now scattered, their formation broken. The station crew cheered, but Sarah remained focused. She wasn't ready to celebrate yet. The battle had just begun, and the enemy would surely regroup. But for now, the humans had made their entrance. They weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. The station crew watched in awe as the reinforcements led the charge, their ships moving in perfect synchronization. The enemy had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. This is only the beginning, Sarah whispered to herself as the battle raged on. We're here to stay. The human fleet, with its reinforcements, had made a powerful statement. They would not be pushed around. Not by anyone. Not anymore. And the enemy, who thought they could easily crush the humans, would soon learn the true power of human resilience. The battle begins, first clash. The moment the reinforcements joined the fight, the entire dynamic of the battlefield changed. The enemy fleet, once confident in their overwhelming numbers, now found themselves under attack from multiple directions. Their massive warships were slow to adapt to the speed and precision of the human fleet, and every maneuver seemed to frustrate them further. Captain Sarah Taylor watched as the enemy's once imposing ships began to stagger, their formations breaking apart. The humans were outmaneuvering them at every turn, making calculated strikes, and then retreating before the enemy could retaliate. It was a dance of chaos, but it was one that the human fleet was leading. Captain, their front line is faltering, Markle reported, his eyes glued to the tactical screen. If we hit them hard now, we might be able to break through. Sarah's gaze shifted to the radar. The enemy fleet's formation was weakening, and their heavy warships were beginning to show signs of damage. The humans were making a dent, but there was still so much at stake. A single mistake could lead to disaster. We're going in. All ships, prepare for the first strike, Sarah ordered firmly. Her voice was filled with the steady authority that had kept her crew alive during countless missions. This was no different. The humans were going to win this. The human fleet surged forward, charging at the enemy's front line with remarkable speed. The enemy responded quickly, launching a series of energy blasts that lit up the void of space. The air in the control room grew thick with tension. Each shot could be their last. The first blast from the enemy ships tore through space, barely missing the lead human ship. Sarah's heart raced. That was too close. Evasive maneuvers, she barked. The human ships swiftly changed course, ducking and weaving as the enemy fired relentlessly. The human fleet was faster, using their agility to avoid direct hits. They would take the fight to the enemy, using their speed to strike while avoiding the enemy's heavy blasts. It was working. They're reloading, Markle reported, looking relieved. We have a small window. Without waiting, Sarah ordered the attack. All ships, fire. A barrage of human energy blasts rocketed through space, hitting the enemy fleet with stunning precision. Explosions ripped through the sides of the enemy ships, their shields flickering under the pressure. The humans weren't giving them a chance to recover. For the first time in the battle, the enemy was on the defensive. We've got them off balance, Commander Ruse said, his voice rising with excitement. But they're regrouping, Captain. Indeed, the enemy wasn't going to give up so easily. Sarah watched as the enemy fleet began to reorganize, their larger ships moving into formation, using their superior firepower to retaliate. Their strategy was simple: hit hard, destroy the human ships, and regain control. But Sarah wasn't worried. She had seen this before. The enemy was predictable. The humans weren't. It was a matter of time before the tables turned again. Keep up the pressure. Don't let them regroup, Sarah commanded. She knew that the longer the enemy ships stayed in formation, the more dangerous they became. They needed to break that formation completely. The battle raged on. Explosions filled the air, but the human fleet continued to weave in and out of the enemy's fire, focusing on striking weak points. The enemy's larger ships were slower to react, giving the human fleet an edge. As the human ship struck again, another large enemy warship erupted in flames, its hull cracking under the pressure of the human onslaught. "One down," Markle muttered under his breath. "But they're still pushing back hard." It was true. The enemy was relentless. Their massive warships kept advancing, firing devastating blasts. The human fleet had to keep moving, keep attacking, or the advantage would slip away. Sarah's mind raced as she analyzed every movement of the battle, looking for the next opening. They couldn't afford to let up. "Incoming from the left," Rude shouted, pointing at the radar. A new wave of enemy ships was approaching at high speed. They had planned a counterattack, and it looked like it would be a direct assault on the human fleet's flank. "All ships, form defensive positions," Sarah commanded. "We can't let them surround us." The human fleet quickly adjusted, splitting into smaller groups to meet the incoming enemy threat. Each ship moved into a tight formation, firing from all sides as the enemy ships closed in. The battle was heating up, the vacuum of space filled with the chaotic brilliance of fire and destruction. "They're closing in on our lead ship," Markle shouted, his face growing pale. "We need to back them up, Captain, or we'll lose them." Without hesitation, Sarah made a snap decision. "All ships, full speed ahead. Protect the lead ship." The human ships surged forward, charging at full speed toward the enemy. Their tactics were working, but they had no time to waste. As the enemy closed in, Sarah's ship was leading the charge, weaving through blasts and dodging incoming fire. The two fleets collided once more, the human ships striking with the full force of their strategy. The larger enemy warships were beginning to show more signs of damage, and with every blow, the humans were gaining the upper hand. But Sarah knew this wasn't over. The battle was far from won, and the enemy's pride and power would make them relentless. Still, the humans had proven one thing: they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to win. And they were making the enemy feel it. The human advantage, turning the tide. The battle had reached a fever pitch. Explosions echoed through the cold vacuum of space as energy blasts from both sides lit up the void. The human fleet, despite being outnumbered, was holding their ground, using speed and cunning to keep the enemy off balance. But even with their best efforts, the human fleet was beginning to show signs of strain. The enemy's sheer firepower was overwhelming, and the human ships were beginning to take damage. The tide of the battle seemed to be turning back in the enemy's favor. Captain Sarah Taylor's heart raced as she observed the unfolding chaos. The enemy had regrouped, and their ships were pushing forward with relentless force, slowly driving the humans back. Sarah knew that if they didn't act fast, they would be overwhelmed. The enemy was gaining ground, and the human fleet was starting to buckle under the pressure. "We need a way to shift the momentum," Sarah muttered, her mind racing. She scanned the battlefield, looking for any opportunity, any chance to turn the tide. And then it hit her, a sudden idea. "Lieutenant Markle, prepare the teleportation system. I need a team on board the enemy flagship." Markle's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Teleportation, Captain. Are you sure? The technology isn't fully tested under combat conditions." Sarah locked eyes with him, her expression unyielding. "We don't have time for a test run. If we don't act now, we'll lose everything. We have to take the fight to them." Markle hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "Understood, Captain. Preparing the system now." The human fleet's ace in the hole was a cutting-edge teleportation technology, something the enemy could never have anticipated. The human ships had developed a system that allowed small, highly trained teams to be teleported directly onto enemy vessels. The idea was simple: disrupt the enemy's operations from within, destroy their systems, create chaos, and give the human fleet the advantage. As Sarah's command was passed down, a small elite team of soldiers, armed with advanced weapons, prepared to be teleported onto the enemy's flagship. The team was led by Lieutenant Ashford, a battle-hardened veteran with a reputation for getting the job done, no matter the odds. They knew what was at stake. If they failed, the human fleet would be lost. "Ready to deploy, Captain," Markle reported after a few tense moments. "The team is in position." "Do it." Sarah's voice was steady as she gave the order. "Teleport them now." With a low hum, the teleportation system activated, and in an instant, the team was gone. They materialized aboard the enemy's flagship, in the heart of the warship's command center. The team wasted no time. Weapons raised, they stormed through the corridors, eliminating enemy soldiers in their path. Their mission was clear: disrupt the enemy's ability to command their fleet, and they would sow confusion in the ranks. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, the human fleet took advantage of the chaos. With the enemy flagship temporarily compromised, the larger warship's coordination faltered. The human ships struck with renewed aggression, targeting key systems on the remaining enemy ships. Their attacks were precise, taking out energy shields, weapon systems, and engines. "Captain, the enemy's flagship has lost control," Markle shouted as he tracked the developments on the tactical screen. "Their fleet is starting to fall apart." Sarah's eyes narrowed. This was their moment. The enemy was beginning to panic, and the tide of the battle was shifting in favor of the humans. But there was still danger. The enemy wasn't fully defeated yet. The human fleet had to push forward and keep the pressure on. "All ships, keep the pressure on the enemy. Don't let them regroup," Sarah ordered. The human ships surged forward again, attacking from multiple angles. The enemy's massive warships were beginning to show signs of distress. The human fleet's smaller, faster ships darted in, hitting weak points with deadly accuracy. Explosions rippled through the enemy ships as their shields failed, and their weapons went offline. The enemy was losing their grip on the battlefield. In the heart of the enemy flagship, Lieutenant Ashford's team was wreaking havoc. They had successfully breached the command center, and the team leader planted an explosive charge on the central control core. The countdown began. In just moments, the enemy's flagship would be disabled, and with it, their coordination would crumble. "Charge is set," Ashford reported, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We're ready to get out of here." "Do it." Sarah's command was sharp. The team activated the teleportation device, and in a flash, they were back on their own ship, just as the enemy flagship erupted in a brilliant explosion. The shockwave rippled through space, and the enemy fleet's already weakened ships staggered, their command systems crippled. "The flagship is down," Markle shouted in disbelief. "The enemy is falling apart." With their flagship gone, the enemy fleet was in chaos. The human fleet, now fully in control, launched a final offensive, picking off the remaining enemy ships one by one. The once imposing fleet was now nothing more than a shadow of its former self. As the last of the enemy ships exploded in space, Sarah let out a long breath, her hands still gripping the controls. The battle was over. The humans had won. The station's crew erupted into cheers, but Sarah remained calm. They had defeated a seemingly unstoppable force, but she knew this was just one battle in a much larger war. Still, for today, humanity had proven something vital, that they could stand up to the galaxy's greatest threats and come out victorious. And with that victory, Sarah knew one thing for sure. The enemy would think twice before underestimating humans again. The galaxy would remember this day. The humans weren't just surviving. They were thriving. And they were here to stay. "We've won," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. But the war is just beginning. The final push, climactic showdown. The battle had turned in humanity's favor, but there was no time to celebrate. The enemy fleet, though battered and broken, wasn't entirely defeated. Some of their ships, especially the smaller ones, had managed to slip away into the darkness of space. They were still out there, regrouping, possibly planning a counterattack. Captain Sarah Taylor knew that the victory wasn't truly theirs until the enemy was completely neutralized. The enemy had underestimated humanity's resilience once before, but she wouldn't give them another chance. The human fleet had made significant progress, but the final push was necessary to ensure the safety of the station and the entire region. "All ships, prepare for the final assault." Sarah's voice rang out with authority, her eyes scanning the remaining enemy ships on the radar. They were retreating, but they were still dangerous. This battle needed to end today. Markle's voice echoed through the control room. "They're trying to regroup. If we don't stop them now, they'll come back stronger." "We'll make sure they don't get the chance," Sarah replied, her jaw set. "This ends today." The human fleet was ready. The last of the enemy ships were no longer a cohesive force. They were scattered, trying to retreat and lick their wounds. But the humans would not let them. With their technology, their speed, and their fierce determination, they were closing in fast. "All ships, close the distance. Hit them now while they're disorganized," Sarah ordered. As the human fleet surged forward, the enemy ships tried to break apart, hoping to escape and save what was left of their forces. But the human ships were faster and more precise. They cut through space like predators hunting their prey, taking out enemy vessels one by one. The smaller ships, once the most agile on the battlefield, were now easy targets, unable to outrun the human fleet's deadly assault. "We've got them on the run, Captain," Lieutenant Markle shouted. "Their ships are breaking apart, and they're trying to retreat into the nearby asteroid field." Sarah's gaze hardened. The asteroid field was dangerous territory, filled with obstacles that could give the enemy the chance to hide. But she wasn't going to let them escape. "We can't let them get away," Sarah commanded. "Pursue them into the asteroid field. Stay close and don't let them regroup." The human fleet followed the orders, entering the asteroid field with caution. The dense clouds of rocks and debris made it harder to track the enemy, but the humans had the advantage. Their ships were small and nimble, able to weave between the asteroids without losing speed or precision. The enemy ships, larger and less maneuverable, struggled to keep up. "Captain, the enemy fleet is cornered," Markle reported with growing excitement. "They can't escape now." With their backs against the wall, the remaining enemy ships made one final attempt to fight back. They launched a desperate barrage of energy blasts, hoping to take down as many human ships as possible before being destroyed. The explosions were fierce, lighting up the darkened space like fireworks. But the human ships dodged and countered with perfect synchronization. Every shot from the enemy that missed brought them closer to their end. The human ships unleashed a concentrated attack, their weapons cutting through the weakened enemy defenses. Slowly, one by one, the remaining enemy ships were taken out, their final defiance swallowed by the void of space. "We've got them, Captain," Lieutenant Markle cheered, his voice full of relief. "The last of their ships are going down." Sarah allowed herself a moment to breathe. The mission had been a success. The human fleet had wiped out the enemy threat, and the station was safe once again. But there was no time for celebration. Not yet. "Markle, check the radar. Make sure there are no more surprises," Sarah said, her mind still alert. As Markle reviewed the final readings, he looked up, his face reflecting both relief and caution. "All enemy ships are destroyed or disabled, Captain. The station is safe. A wave of relief washed over Sarah, but she remained focused. This battle had been hard-fought, and the enemy had shown that they would not go down without a fight. But humanity had proven something today. They had fought, they had won, and they had shown the galaxy just what humans were capable of. Good work, everyone. You've done the impossible. Sarah spoke, her voice filled with pride. We've sent a message today. The galaxy will remember this victory. And they'll know humanity doesn't back down. The crew erupted into cheers, but Sarah remained calm, her thoughts already on what came next. There would be more battles, more challenges. But for now, they had earned this victory. The human fleet had proven that they were a force to be reckoned with, and anyone who thought otherwise would soon learn the true meaning of human resilience. As Sarah watched the stars flicker outside the station's viewports, she couldn't help but feel a sense of determination swell within her. This was just the beginning, and the galaxy would never forget the day humanity stood tall. This is our moment, she whispered to herself, her gaze fixed on the horizon. And we're not done yet. Victory and the aftermath. Conclusion. The battle had ended. The enemy fleet was no more than floating wreckage in the dark expanse of space. The asteroid field, now quiet, was a silent witness to the human fleet's triumph. As the last enemy vessel drifted into nothingness, the crew of the station and the human fleet allowed themselves a moment of peace. Captain Sarah Taylor stood on the command bridge, staring out at the stars. The battle had been fierce, but humanity had emerged victorious. The crew of the station cheered and exchanged high fives, their faces lit with the joy of survival and triumph. They had done it. Against all odds, they had fought back the overwhelming enemy fleet. But Sarah knew that while this victory was important, it was only the beginning of something much bigger. Captain, we've received a message from command, Markle said, breaking Sarah's moment of reflection. They've acknowledged the victory, and they're sending reinforcements to assist with the aftermath. Good, Sarah replied, her voice steady but filled with pride. We'll need them. There's still much to be done. The crew continued to celebrate, but Sarah's mind was already focused on the future. This battle had proven that humanity could stand against even the greatest threats. The galaxy, once a distant and dangerous place, now seemed a little smaller. Humanity had made its mark. The station's commander, Ruiz, approached Sarah with a smile. Captain, you did it. The fleet did it. You've made history. Sarah nodded, but she couldn't fully embrace the celebration just yet. This victory was a team effort, Ruiz. Every person aboard this station, every pilot in that fleet, they all did their part. We fought together, and we won together. Ruiz looked out at the stars as well, a quiet respect in his eyes. But you led them, Captain. You made the call when it mattered most. Sarah shook her head, her gaze fixed on the now debris-filled asteroid field. It wasn't just me. It was all of us. We've all proven that humanity won't back down. The enemy thought we were weak, but today we've shown the galaxy our strength. We won't be ignored anymore. As the human fleet continued to patrol the area, making sure no further threats remained, Sarah took a moment to reflect on the cost of the battle. It hadn't been easy. Lives had been lost, ships had been damaged, and the toll of war could never be ignored. But the sacrifices made were not in vain. They had held their ground, protected the station, and sent a clear message to anyone who dared challenge them. The station's crew slowly returned to their posts, and Sarah sat in her chair, watching the stars. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of calm. They had done it. They had won. Sir, we're getting a report from the enemy's homeworld, Markle said, his voice drawing Sarah's attention back to the task at hand. They're sending a delegation to discuss terms. It seems they're ready to negotiate. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The enemy had been forced into submission. They were coming to the table, ready to face humanity's terms. This was unprecedented. Prepare for communication, Sarah said, her voice firm. "We'll show them that humanity doesn't just fight to survive. We fight to win. And now, we decide the terms." As the message from the enemy's homeworld began to come through, Sarah stood tall, knowing that the battle they had fought had changed the course of history. Humanity was no longer just a distant species in the galaxy's eyes. They were a force to be reckoned with. And this was just the beginning. "We've proven ourselves today," Sarah whispered to herself, her voice filled with quiet resolve. "But we're not done yet. The galaxy better get ready. Humanity is here to stay." With that, the next chapter in humanity's story began. The future was unknown, but one thing was certain. Humanity had made its mark, and they would never be the underdogs again. The galaxy would remember the day the humans fought back. And now, the universe would learn what it truly meant to challenge the strength of humankind. The end.